Bhai, for this nice introduction. Especially, I am very happy to learn that you have also mentioned the non-technical achievements of an engineer to these August gathering, faculties and students of civil engineering and structural engineering who are participating here. I am really very happy that you mentioned that I am a certified advanced scuba diver, and I feel that each and everyone should get once in a lifetime experience of scuba diving, that is going underwater in open sea, just to realize the creation of God. Because Darshan Bhai, I have always believed that whatever am I audible clearly and you can see my video?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Properly audible.
Okay. I will just take a couple of minutes to mention about the scuba diving and then I will start with the topic. See, whatever we see around us, all that has been manipulated by mankind. You see roads, you see buildings, you see terrain, everything is manipulated by us. Everything is constructed by us. So it is not God's creation. It is originally created by God, but adulterated and manipulated as per our wishes and thoughts. But if you go to open sea, underwater, the terrain which you see has been absolutely the way the God has thought it to be. So every now and then we see that we thank the God that whatever He has given to us, we are very thankful to Him. In any religion, you maybe it is Hindu or it is Christian or it is Muslim or any other religion, everyone is very thankful to the Almighty for whatever the Almighty has created and given as a gift to the mankind. But we have never seen the original creation of God, because, as I have mentioned to you earlier, that everything around us is adulterated and has been developed as per wish of the mankind. But if you go underwater and you see many things which are original creation of the God, sometimes you dive into the open sea and reach certain terrain. You may be the first person in the whole world or the mankind till now to go there and see that things as it was created by God. So that is the first and the most important thing. Second thing is we when you go underwater, you realize that it is altogether a different world. Currently what we see in here, whatever around us, is only, the medium is air. So we are in the medium of air. While you go underwater, all around you is a medium of water. That is again a different experience. The gravitational force that is acting upon you is same, but the feeling is quite different, as if you are into a spacecraft where zero gravity is there. So that is also worth experiencing. And the third thing is the ecosystem which is there underwater is completely different than what we have above water. See, I have seen many people who have been claiming that they have moved all around the world to all the countries in the world. But one thing is very specific, which I would like to mention here, is that the whole Earth is covered by water to the extent of 70%. Right? So only 30% land is available on the surface of Earth. And out of these 30%, not more than 30 to 40% is habitable land. That is only 10 to 15% of the Earth's surface is habitable. So whenever you say that you have moved across all the countries in the world, it means that you have explored only 10 to 15% of the earth, not more than that. But still we keep on boasting that we have moved around the whole of the earth. While 70% of the earth is underwater, 70% of the living objects are underwater, and whatever the ecosystem and the system of rain or whatever we get today is only because if we conserve the water around us. That is 70% of Earth. Whatever conservation efforts we are putting right now is only related to land, the forest available on the land, the river which is available passing through the lands, the ponds, the greeneries that we see around us, or the cities that we see around us, or the villages around us. But no efforts has been made to conserve the ocean of the world, because they contribute 70% of the whole surface area of the earth. So whatever small amount of efforts that you can put in to conserve the oceans of the earth, to conserve the underwater life in 70% of area of the earth, I think that will be a great contribution from individually each one of us for sustainable development or for maintaining the environment of the whole earth. With this, just a short note about conservation of water around us and the conservation of open seas. Let us switch over to the topic for today, which is anti-terrorism design. I'll just take a minute to share my screen with all of you, and I hope that you can see my screen now. Can you see the screen now?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. But slide.
Yeah.
Yes.
Can you
Yes,
see
sir.
these slides now? Okay, fine. Because I can't see the participants, I have to switch over to the Microsoft Team screen again to see other people. So I request all of you that any point of presentation, if you need uh, to interact with me, just unmute your mic and let me give a minute so that I can recognize you, and then we can interact it. The topic today is for this particular webinar is anti-terrorism design of buildings, a structural primer. The image which I have put on the front slide, I think most of you are familiar with that, which is Hotel Taj at Gateway of India, Mumbai. A very famous terrorist attack which has taken place a few years before. I had some experience of working on anti-terrorism design of buildings way back in 2005, 2006, and 2007 when I was working on certain Middle East projects at Qatar, Doha. We were designing a government building which is meant for record keeping of digital data for the whole country. So it was called a data center. And suddenly, in immediate vicinity of that, a terrorist attack has taken place on World Trade Center, which resulted in loss of life for many people. Thereby, the client came to us suggesting that can we design this national data center of Qatar, Doha city, for a specified threat of terrorist attack. And then a team of structural engineers who were working on the job started exploring whether it is possible or not and what literature is available as far as anti-terrorism design of buildings are concerned. It was a surprise to know that rarely some literature was available on standardization of anti-terrorism design of buildings. Even for determining a specific threat level or for determination of loads that may act onto a building for a specific type of terrorist attack, even that literature was also not available. So a lot of exploration and research was carried out to scroll through whatever available papers were there, and then we came to certain conclusion. We could find out certain resources, certain literature based on which not the standardization of designs, no literature was available, but based on the research available, based on the determination of loads acting on a building for a specific type of terrorist attack, for a specific level of threat, we had designed a strategy and got it approved through the client for which the building was designed. So today, whatever I'm going to share with you is based on that little experience that I had for anti-terrorism design of buildings. Perhaps that was the first building in Asia which was designed for a specific threat level, for a specific type of terrorist attack. I think we successfully completed that project, and still it is existing, and perhaps the only project which is designed for anti-terrorism, specific threat level and specific terrorist strategy or type of attack. The presentation outline for this an hour or 1.5 hours will cover the following aspects, and I hope that we all will become very comfortable and very much acquainted with these criteria that I have set forth for understanding of participants as well as my side. We will try to see why anti-terrorism design is required. The second point that we will go through is we will try to highlight or establish what should be the goal of anti-terrorism design. We will also try to know about various anti-terrorism strategies that the terrorist can use or that the client or an engineers can use to prevent the level of damage to the property which may be subjected to terrorist attack. We will identify the major issues which are of concern as far as anti-terrorism design of buildings are there. And then we will have an overview of anti-terrorism design in terms of prediction of external loads, in terms of understanding the level of damages that is expected, and in terms of the structural analysis and design. Now, as I have earlier said, that whatever I will share with you is based on my hands-on experience of anti-terrorism design of couple of buildings. But as on today also, let me tell you that this has not been standardized. So therefore, it is the choice of an individual, the client and the engineer to decide about what should be the strategy for anti-terrorism design for a specific project. Second thing is, as the title of the presentation suggested, we are only going to deal with concepts. So I am not going to load this presentation with mathematical equations. We will just touch upon various aspects, highlight them which are important for anti-terrorism design. Because when we talk about anti-terrorism design, it is not only mathematics. I think it contributes a major portion of the ATD, but there are several other things also like security aspects, architectural planning, design, minimum standoff distance and other things which also plays an important role, right? So this presentation, though it would focus on structural engineering part, civil engineering part and architectural part, but it will miss out on to the equations and mathematics part of it. So let us try to get a on hand feel of what an anti-terrorism design could look like. So first, why anti-terrorism design? As I have mentioned the outline of presentation, that why anti-terrorism design is required for our country. I don't know how many of you are aware about this, but every year a global terrorism index is being published. I think it is published by University of Maryland, based on I think the Department of Economics and Engineering. Together they carry out this survey and they arrive at global terrorism index for each and every country of the world. If you will just Google this onto the internet, you will get this latest report of 2020 Global Terrorism Index. You can download it and you can verify this. What they try to do is they try to give this index to each and every country of the world. The highest GTI possible is 10 and the lowest GTI possible is 0. 0 means that there is no impact because of terrorism activities on that particular country, and 10 is the highest. It means that the impact of terrorism is very high. Now, part of the world map is also displayed on this slide, wherein the different colors are shown. As you can see, the darkest color will show a very high GTI, that is from 8 to 10, it is dark brown, and from 6 to 8, it is a high GTI, which is from medium to high and is indicated by a red color. So the whole world has been assigned GTI, and the graphical representation of the maps is shown here. This is the map of the world which covers our part of the countries, that is India, Pakistan, Afghanistan, and so on. You can see that India and Pakistan both are having a red color. And this first slide which I had shown you here, red colors means it has got a very high impact of terrorism, ranging from a GTI of 6 to GTI of 8. You can see that just next to the Pakistan, you can see Afghanistan here, which has got a very dark brown color, which indicates that The GTI for that country is very high in the range of 8 to 10, right? So I have mentioned earlier that why anti-terrorism design is required. You can see that our country, along with our neighboring countries of Pakistan, Afghanistan, they fall into a GTI zone, that is Global Terrorism Index zone, of very high. That is, impact of terrorism is very high to high range. Like Afghanistan is very high, and India and Pakistan falls in the range of high. So that is the first reason. I am also trying, I have also put up here the rank based on the GTI of various countries of the world, depending on the GTI, that is the impact of terrorism on those countries. You can see that Afghanistan, this is based on the data published in 2020. So it is called GTE index for 2020, which is again based on the data collected for the year 2019. Right, so then this will get modified every year depending on the data that is generated previous year. Now what data they are looking forward to in calculating this, they have considered like the number of deaths that has taken place, fatalities that has taken place during the year because of terrorist attack, number of injuries that has taken place because of terrorist attack in a specific country, and number of events that has taken place, along with the economic loss that has taken place to properties and infrastructure of a particular country. They and different types of weightages are assigned to these criterias, and based on different weightages and the number of counts of different parameters, a weighted average is calculated in terms of GTI, that is Global Terrorism Index. Now, as I mentioned to you, based on the data generated for 2019, in 2020, this GTI is published. So, Afghanistan, as per GTI 2020, yeah, someone wishes to discuss something? Does someone wish to discuss something here? Okay, fine. Let us go ahead. Afghanistan has the highest score, which is 9.6, and it carries rank number 1 for Global Terrorism Index, meaning that the impact of terrorism is highest amongst all the countries of the world in Afghanistan. Second rank is Iraq, third is Nigeria, fourth is Syria, fifth is Somalia, sixth is Yemen, and seventh is Pakistan, followed by India at rank number 8, right? So India has a GTI of 7.4, Pakistan has a GTI of 7.5, Yemen has GTI of 7.5, Somalia has 7.6, Syria 7.7, and Afghanistan tops it with a GTI of 9.6. So out of these more than 150 countries of the world, India stands at rank number 8, suggesting that the impact of terrorism is very high for our country. Now, this is top 10 countries, comparison of top 10 countries over past many years as far as terrorist activities are concerned in terms of the GTI score which the country will carry. As shown here, you will be surprised, every one of us will be surprised to know that in 2002, the rank of Afghanistan was 16, and it carried forward until 2004, where the Afghanistan rank was more than 10 from GTI of all the countries. But from 2005 onwards, this rank kept on increasing, and in 2018 and 2019, Afghanistan has stopped the GTI, meaning that the impact of terrorism is highest in Afghanistan amongst all countries of the world. Iraq over last decade has remained at rank number 1 to rank number 2. Nigeria rank number 3 to rank number 4. Syria 4 to 5 over last 5 to 6 years, and Somalia has come to rank number 5 in 2019. If you look at Pakistan, then even in 2002, you will realize that Pakistan was ranked at number 12. while India was ranked at number 2. In 2002, 2003, 2004, and 2005, up to say 2011 or 2012, India's rank was from 2 to 5 only, which is, I think, a great matter of concern for all of us. Well, see, Pakistan stood at rank number 12 in 2002, while India was at rank number 2, meaning that the impact of terrorism in India is 6 times more higher than the impact of terrorism in Pakistan. This I am talking about 2002. Let us see what the comparison between Pakistan and India in 2019. India stood at rank 8 while Pakistan stood at rank number 7. So, a lot of improvement has been done in India from 2002 to 2019 to bring the GTI index down from rank number 2 to rank number 8, while Pakistan from in 2002 was ranked at number 12. The rank has increased in 2019 to rank number 7, right? So considering all these aspects, we cannot say that India is a country where terrorist activities are not there. See, these figures would reflect. This is rank number 8, as we have seen earlier. The GTI score is 7.4. And in 2019, this data is based in 2019, that number of people's life that we have lost is 277. Around 440 people were injured, and at least 558 incidents of minor to major terrorist attack took place in our country. This is in year 2019, right? Total death that has taken place in our country since 2001, from 2001 onwards till date, that is till 2019 end, the total death that has taken place due to terrorist activity in our country is 8,748, which is not a small amount. That's by different groups carrying out terrorism activities in our country. You can see that Maoist and Communist Party of India, 50% that's are attributed to that, and Jaish-e-Mohammed, around 20 to 30% deaths are attributed to that, and remaining 30% deaths are attributed to other groups. It is very interesting to note that the terrorist attacks, what was targeted during these terrorist attacks. I think the last pie chart that you see here, attacks by target, we realize that private citizens and property, they have been attacked during these terrorist activities. Almost 40% of all the attacks that has taken place in 2019 were targeting private citizens and properties. Any major, terrorist attack that you will recollect would be perhaps in the attack on the infrastructure, that is in the open streets or open roads. Like you have a scooter packed with TNT, explosion takes place. You have a suicide bomber carrying a bag of TNT, or you have a vehicle which is full of TNT, which is crashed into an infrastructure or a building, right? So this is where engineering comes in picture, because you see that during 2019, around 40% of terrorist attacks were targeting private citizens and property, that is infrastructure facilities as well as buildings, right? So this is where the engineering comes in picture, and this is why we should design our infrastructures and we should design our buildings to resist a certain level of terrorist attack, right? So why anti-terrorism design is required? Because our infrastructure, our properties, or our buildings that we are designing are subjected to terrorist attack. India ranks amongst top 10 countries in the world where the impact of terrorism is very high, and this impact results in loss of life of people. This impact results in the disturbance or the collapse of the infrastructure facilities as well as building facilities or properties of an individual or the government. That is why we as an engineer should be involved in planning the anti-terrorism strategies for the whole countries, with specific reference to design of infrastructure and buildings. That is where civil engineering and structural engineering will come in picture. That is where architectural people will come in picture. There has to be a trend. started in near future, that those buildings which are very important, those buildings which are into a certain likelihood of terrorist attack kind of neighborhood should be compulsorily designed for a specific threat level, for a specific type of terrorist attack strategy. That the days are not far away. I see that this will be an immediate future and this will be required in future, though there are no standards available currently, right? So that is first part of the presentation, that why anti-terrorism design is required, because India is very much susceptible to terrorist attacks. A lot of lives are lost, a lot of property is damaged, infrastructure is lost. Therefore, we must try to design our infrastructure as well as property for anti-terrorism concept. Second, goal of anti-terrorism design. What should be the goal of anti-terrorism design? Okay, I have shown you few photographs here which are very famous. First one is this World Trade Center. The terrorist attack may lead to collapse of whole or part of a building, right? So World Trade Center, they were iconic buildings for USA, not only for USA, for the whole world. But the terrorist attack resulted first into a part collapse of local collapse of these particular buildings, resulting into a progressive and sequential collapse of the whole building, right? The second image that you see is also I think it is from Lebanon attack on US embassy, and the buildings nearby have been attacked by terrorists, and you can see that the whole building has not collapsed, but part of the building has collapsed. So a terrorist attack on infrastructure facilities, on people using that infrastructure facilities or buildings, are the attacks are targeting these buildings, may result in collapse of the building fully or partially, and it may result in killing people, right? So we may not be able to prevent or eliminate terrorist attack as a civil engineer, structural engineer, or an architect. It's not our job. It's not within our domain to prevent and eliminate the terrorist attack. The onus falls onto the shoulder of the authorities, right? But we can design buildings to prevent collapse under terrorist attack, right? So what is the goal of anti-terrorism design? Like in earthquake resistant design or wind resistant design, the goal is to minimize the loss of human life. Likewise, here also, the goal of anti-terrorism design is to minimize the loss of human life. How do we minimize this? We design our buildings to sustain a specific threat level, a specific type of terrorist attack, a well-defined terrorist attack, so that when that specific type of terrorist attack takes place on a particular infrastructure or a building, or a certain level of threat is realized during its useful lifespan, then the building does not collapse, or the local collapse of the building does not take place, killing people, right? So our design goal should be to minimize the loss of human life by making buildings which do not collapse due to terrorist attack for a specific threat level and for a specific strategy. Okay, now we have been talking about various terrorist strategies, right? That for a particular type of terrorist strategies, we should be able to design buildings. So let us know about various anti-terrorism strategies. There are actually 4 anti-terrorism strategies, which is listed here. First is deception. Second is intelligence measures. Third is physical and operational protection. And fourth is structural hardening. Now, when I say that these are the anti-terrorism strategies, okay, out of this, many of these are terrorism strategies also. Okay, that is, the terrorist would be using many of these strategies, right? For example, deception. The terrorist, they may kind of use this strategy. If you have seen old movies, like James Bond movies, or any of our old Hindi movies of 1980s, in Hindi movies, there used to be a person who does a lot of charity in the society, okay, and he who has got a very good impression amongst the society, like he is a great donor, he is a very helping hand to the poor people of the society. But in fact, he has constructed his own bungalow in such a way, that they have got a bookshelf in the bungalow, but if you just place the bookshelf, it opens to a den, and this particular den is the area from where he carries out all the illegal activities, maybe smuggling of gold, or distribution of liquor in the society, or drugs in the society, and so on. Right. So what actually that gentleman is doing, he is deceiving the society. He is becoming a very good person in front of the society, in front of the policeman, but in fact he is deceiving this, and he is carrying out all the activities under the aegis of that good character or good personality that he is projecting himself to be in the society. So he is deceiving the society, right? So in fact, he can be called as a terrorist, right? Who is using this technique of deception to cheat the society, to cheat the people, right? We also use the same strategy, deception, right, to as an anti-terrorism strategies. How? We will quickly touch upon that when we come to the topic. Okay. Second, one best example is if you have seen the recent movie of Bell Bottom. What they are doing is, in Bell Bottom Akshay Kumar movie, if you have seen, they take the character of a, though they were raw agents, 4 or 5 people, they were raw agents, but they take the role of an airport crew, right, to deceive the terrorists who have hijacked the plane, right? So they take the role of an airport crew, and then they enter into the aircraft. They keep hold of those terrorists, right? So that is an anti-terrorism strategy of deception which they have been using. Likewise, in James Bond movie also, you see, he has got his den somewhere in a jungle, or somewhere underwater in the sea, or somewhere on top of the mountain. Like if you come across a lot of James Bond movies where the villain has got this type of hideouts, right? He's deceiving the society, like he is pretending that he's carrying out a great research work over there, but in fact his motto is to construct a missile which can cause many deaths in the whole of the world, and he wanted to capture the world. So deception is a strategy which is largely mainly used by the terrorist group, but at the same time we can also use this as an anti-terrorism strategy. What I have mentioned here is that there are two types of strategies. One is passive, one is active. So deception is a passive type of strategy. Passive means once you do something with that particular strategy and then you forget about it. Okay, so it is only once in a blue moon kind of operation that you have to take care of. While active strategy is, it will require a continuous monitoring, continuous controlling of that particular measures, right? So intelligence measures is an active strategy. Physical and operational protection is an active strategy, while deception is a passive strategy. Like you once make a building which looks like a hospital, but it is the main center for the intelligence bureau. Okay, so deception, you have made it one time and you forget it. So it is a passive strategy. Intelligence measures is an active strategy. Physical and operational protection is an active strategy, because you need that for continuously to be monitored and to be controlled, right? Structural hardening is the fourth anti-terrorism strategy, which is a passive strategy. So what is structural hardening? It has nothing to do with the structural hardening that we see in structural steel, but it means that we are making a structure hard enough to resist the terrorist attack, thereby meaning that it is not going to collapse under a particular threat level specified strategy of terrorism, right? So basically there are four anti-terrorism strategies: deception, which is a passive strategy; intelligence measures, it is an active strategy; physical and operational protection is an active strategy; and structural hardening is a passive strategy. So what is deception? As I mentioned to you earlier, a building or facility is made to appear more under low risk or more protected, and therefore the attacker is misdirected, right? As I told you earlier, that if you have a very important building to be protected, then you change the appearance of the building, like you make it a hospital building appear from outside, while in fact it is the main headquarter for any intelligence agency or a government treasury or whatever we say like that, so that from outside people does not realize that it is a particular facility, so that the attacker is misdirected. He will near realize that this is the target that he is looking forward to, right? So it is a passive kind of strategy. Second is intelligence measures. It is an active type of strategy. It means understanding, preventing, and preempting the moves of the terrorists. Now, this is what the Intelligence Bureau, the RAW, and other agencies in each and every country, or FBI, they have been doing, right? They have been keeping their eyes open, ears open. They have their agents moving around in the society to find out the likely terrorist attacks based on the clues that are available to them through, kind of telephonic discussions which they trap, or through the videos or cameras, whatever they go through, right? So this intelligence measures is an anti-terrorism strategy which helps to prevent or counter a terrorist attack. For example, like we had an earlier indication that on a particular day of 15th August or 23rd January, it is likely that certain cities of Gujarat or Maharashtra are going to be attacked by terrorists. In past, such type of awareness was created amongst the government authorities, and they were requested to take full protection measures to curb any likely attack, right? So this is intelligence measure type of anti-terrorism strategy, which is active type of strategy. Physical and operational protection is also an active type of strategy, which includes CCTV surveillance, which includes providing security measures, including security guards and other security barriers, providing sensors, etc., to help identify, prevent, and counter a terrorist attack. Okay, as you all know, I think around it is almost 6 to 7 years now that city of Surat, perhaps it was the first city in the whole of Gujarat, or I would say whole of the country, to install CCTVs on public areas, that is on public roads, malls, and near cinema theaters and everywhere for surveillance, right? And that has helped reduce the crime rate also to a great extent. And whatever crime if takes place, it is very easy to find out the culprit, and it helps a lot, right? So physical and operational protection facility is an active type of anti-terrorism strategies, which is now getting involved in several cities in terms of CCTV surveillance by providing security barriers, security guards, and specific type of sensors being installed in public areas. Okay, next is serpentine access. This is also very important, providing fences, perimeter protection, and buffer zones, etc. If you have got a very important building, and then providing an access from road to that particular building, entrance to the building, usually what we do is to reduce the cost of infrastructure or cost of roads or cost of approaches. We take the minimum distance, right? Minimum distance means from road to direct to the entrance, we draw a straight line providing a minimum length of road. This should be avoided as far as anti-terrorism design is concerned, because you make a shortest distance or shortest approach to the entrance to the building. It means that the terrorists will reach to the entrance to the building in minimum time, without you noticing them, or without the security and other people will getting enough time to counter their attack. So what is preferred is we provide serpentine access, right? So a straight line distance could be 100 meters, while you provide a serpentine access through kind of hideouts or by other barriers, and then you make that entry instead of 100 meters, make that length of access to the main building as 500 meters. Okay, so if you make instead of 100 meters, you have a length of 500 meters available. Therefore, the terrorist, trying to attack that particular building will have to spend more time. It means that we will have more time to identify them, to upscale the defense and counter their attack, right? So it is very, common sense that instead of providing a direct approach to building, provide a serpentine access, provide even within the serpentine access also, we need to provide fences, perimeter protection, buffer zones, so that at every level there is a enough security checking, and then only the people are allowed to approach to the main entrance of the building, right? So it is also an active kind of measure, physical and operational protection, which will require to be controlled and monitored continuously. It is not like once you do and then you forget it. Okay. The fourth anti-terrorism strategy is structural hardening. It is a passive type of strategy. That is, you make this particular building in such a way that you give adequate strength and stiffness to the building and facility, so that it can withstand a potential terrorist attack which is specified or predefined at the design stage, right? So for new buildings, you can make buildings in such a way that they are capable enough, their strength and stiffness is capable enough to resist the forces induced because of a terrorist attack, or the deflections are within permissible limits. You impart adequate stiffness to that, so that the deflections remains within the permissible limits during the terrorist attacks, and the people are not killed. The building does not collapse, right? Okay, so we have gone through four type of anti-terrorism strategies, which in fact out of these, the first three, deception, intelligence, physical and operational protections, many of them are also used by terrorists as terrorism strategies. So जैसे हिंदी में कहावत है कि लोहा लोहे को काटता है. So whatever strategies terrorists are using, the same strategies can be used for anti-terrorism also. The idea of defense strategy is that, right? Now, usually or ideally, any building which you are designing for ATD, anti-terrorism design, right, should have all the four measures placed in layers, right? When I say should be placed in layers, it means that the attacker will encounter them one by one in sequence. Okay, for example, an example is shown here in with this chart, which shows that first the attacker will have to encounter the deception strategy, then it has to encounter the intelligence strategy, then it has to encounter the physical and operational protection type of strategy, and then it has to encounter the structural hardening type of strategy, right? So when all these four anti-terrorism strategies are put into sequence in any order of priority, right, the attacker will have to spend a lot of time in penetrating through all these strategies, right? So these will increase the attack time. Thereby, it gives more time to security forces to upscale their defense or launch a counter attack, right? If you remember, during Mahabharata Yuddha also, when Abhimanyu was killed, I think they had a specific strategy of 7 layers, right? So each and every layer one has to penetrate in order to reach to the Don, or the main person whom they wanted to kill or defeat, right? So there were also 7 layers of different strategy. Here also we have four different types of anti-terrorism strategies to be put into sequence, like deception. In deception, you can have two strategies. In intelligence, you can have 2 or 3 strategies. In physical operational protection, you can have 2 or 3 strategies. And finally, you have structural hardening. So you can have several layers of strategies which the attacker has to penetrate in sequence one by one, thereby increasing the attack time, giving us more time to upscale the defense, giving more time to the security forces, and giving more time to the defending people to counter the terrorist attack. So this is the ideal situation of planning a defense strategy for anti-terrorism design for a particular building or infrastructure facilities. This is the idea. Okay, what actually happens in practice is that the defense strategies will overlap. and they may appear together. For example, I have shown a zone of highest protection at the core, at the center, and then the different strategies will overlap each other, right? So there may be an attacker may choose a particular type of approach wherein he has to encounter only deception and physical operational protection, and then structural hardening, right? Okay, so as ideally the strategy should be planned in sequence so that it is encountered one by one, but practically sometimes it is seldom possible and the strategies would overlap with each other. So this we have to keep in mind. Okay, so we have been through all these strategies, like 4 strategies that we have seen: deception and intelligence measures and operational and maintenance features, right? They are general, common. But as an engineer, we are most concerned with the last anti-terrorism strategy, which is called structural hardening, right? It is the final and most important frontier of anti-terrorism design, because the other strategies that we had visited are kind of preventive strategies, while this is the strategy which will actually save life of the people when the building or infrastructure facilities are attacked. Because by structural hardening, our goal is to prevent the collapse of the building so that the people inside the building and the data or the objects which are there inside the building are not affected by it. Okay, so when all other measures fail, the structural hardening helps in saving the life of the people. It can give you more time to facilitate evacuation. It will also give you time for rescue. It will prevent the collapse of the building and preventing injuries from flying debris of the non-structural element, right? So structural hardening is the anti-terrorism strategies which we are directly dealing with as a civil engineer, as an architect, or a structural engineer, right? So architects, civil engineers, structural engineers shoulder added responsibilities to mitigate the effect of terrorist attack. Now, how do we deal with this as an architect, as a civil engineer or structural engineer? How do we deal with structural hardening? We can design buildings to withstand terrorist attack without collapse and protect the life of the people. Do you remember what was the goal of the anti-terrorism design? It is to minimize the loss of human life by designing buildings which does not collapse during a terrorist attack, right? Okay, so we are through with different types of anti-terrorism strategies. Let us identify the issues in anti-terrorism design. Let us identify various issues in anti-terrorism design, and then we will have an overview of ATD. In the meantime, are there any points for discussion from the participants? Then I'll be happy to attend to them. I hope all of you are attentive to the presentation. Are there any points for discussion? We can discuss it right now. Darshan bhai?
Yes, Nilesh sir.
Ha. So I feel this could mean that the participants either, I don't know how many of them are attentive. Those who are attentive can just raise their hand.
All the
Yeah.
participants are requested to write in the chat box either yes, no, whatever.
Yeah. So that I can realize whether you are attentive or not.
Because we don't want any one-way communication. We want an interactive session.
Exactly. Exactly. So I can see 4-5 hands up. That is really good. But those who would wish to interact right now can interact based on whatever has been presented till now. It is open for everyone. So as Darshan Bhai has rightly said, you can interact with me at any point of time.
So if you have any questions, then you can unmute yourself and
Yeah.
directly interact with Nilesh sir. or else you can write the question in the chat box also.
Yeah, you can write the questions in the chat box also, and you can interact with me at any point of time. Okay, I can see many of you have written here. Yes, 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 sir. It's going on well. Everything is fine, right? But I would be more happy if some interaction takes place, because that is the way to enhance knowledge mutually. And that is why, we all are together. It is not just to put on record that we have attended a webinar or I have delivered a lecture, not like that. Okay. So please be proactive, and at any point of time, you can ask me to stop and interact with me on any front, on any aspect of this presentation, right? We have been almost through 50% of the presentation, and 50% is remaining. So should I go ahead?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, fine. So
Sir,
let us identify various
Nilesh
issues
sir.
involved. Yeah.
Sir, there is one question from Aurora sir, who is
Okay.
professor in GEC Baruch. That
Okay.
do we need to design blast resistant building? How to consider energy?
Yeah, exactly. See, when we come to analysis and design part of this, Arora ji, when we come to analysis and design part of this, I will highlight that because terrorist attack through explosion is the main thing for which we have to design. And for a specific type of explosion, how to evaluate load, that I will highlight in the presentation. Okay, that I'm going to highlight. But as I told you earlier, it will be only conceptual things that we will be discussing here, and I can suggest you several references which would be very helpful to you in designing, right? So we are going to discuss that. So I hope you will wait for a few more minutes till we reach that particular topic. Is that okay? Okay, shall we move ahead then
Yes, sir.
and identify issues in ATD? Okay. Okay, what are the issues in anti-terrorism design? Again, this is from a general perspective, not only from the engineering point of view. The four major issues with anti-terrorism design is: first, cost; second is building bylaws; third is terrorist tactics; and fourth is threat assessment. We are going to see each one of them one by one. In the meantime, I have shown a small figure here. Now, this is taken from literature, nothing of my own, right? But just to make you understand, just remember that this is a standoff distance that we have shown from the level of threat to the asset. That is the point of initiation of threat in terms of kind of say explosion. The clear distance which is available to the asset or the property or the building that we are designing is called as a standoff distance, right? So when we discuss cost of a anti-terrorism design, this plays a major role. Therefore, I have shown this figure here, right? So there are four issues that we need to understand and realize before we do ATD, that is anti-terrorism design. First issue is cost, second is building bylaws, third is terrorist tactics, and fourth is threat assessment. Okay, let us discuss them one by one. First is cost. Now, usually, see, in civil engineering or structural engineering or architecture, whatever cost we assign to a building till this point of time was the initial cost only. Like कोई भी अगर क्लाइंट तुम्हारे पास आता है, आपके पास आता है, या किसी कंसल्टेंट के पास जाता है, या किसी कॉन्ट्रैक्टर के पास जाता है, तो फर्स्ट क्वेश्चन ही विल आस्क इज हाउ मच इट इज गोइंग टू कॉस्ट। अगर बिल्डर आपसे बिल्डिंग डिजाइन करवाता है तो ही विल आस्क कि भाई ये बिल्डिंग कितने रुपए में पड़ेगा, like 1500 rupees a square feet or 2000 rupees a square feet or 2200 rupees a square feet. This is the benchmark or parameter which is considered as a basic for decision making, right? I would like to draw your kind attention to the fact that this is the initial cost only that we are talking about. We are forgetting about the life cycle cost of the building. by just giving importance to initial cost, that is cost of construction, including the civil work, architectural work, interior work, and infrastructure cost. But all that is attributed only to one type of cost of the building, which is initial cost. Why? Life cycle cost of the building is completely different, because the building is going to serve you for at least 40 to 50 years from the date of completion of its construction in all respect. And during those 40 to 50 years also, a lot of costs will be incurred, lot of cost is involved, and therefore we must be looking to life cycle cost of the building and not only the initial cost, which is treated in terms of the cost of construction. Okay. Some cases the initial cost may be low, but operational maintenance cost for a period of 50 years could be very high. So we must focus on the life cycle cost of the building and not the initial cost of the building. One thing which I would like to draw your attention to is that the initial cost of the building in case of ATD is highly influenced by a standoff distance. Okay, just beforehand, I will tell you that minimum 50-meter of standoff distance is required whenever you target anti-terrorism design for even a low threat level of building, right? So minimum standoff distance is 50 meters. Now, our local regulations or bylaws will require that margin area available could be 6 meter or maximum 9 meter for a building that you're going to put up in a town planning scheme in the urban development area or within the franchised area of the municipal corporation, right? But as soon as you talk about ATD, the minimum standoff distance required will be 50 meters. It means that in order to fulfill that particular criteria, you will require a larger piece of land, right? If you want to construct 1,000 square meter of building, you need for example, you need a land area of about 2,000 square meter. This considers a margin area of 9 meter only, right? But as long as you target ATD, minimum standard distance required will be 50 meters, right? So in case you want to put up a constructed facility of 1,000 square meter, the land area required will be at least 5,000 meters square, because you need to provide a standoff distance of 50 meters wherever roads or approaches are available, right? So when we talk about ATD, the initial cost will be very high because the standoff distance comes into picture, right? So what is the standoff distance? That figure I'm again discussing here. It is the nearest distance between the building or the facade of the building and the unprotected access point to the property. That is the initiation of threat, right? That is called a standoff distance. Okay, now there are two types of cost. One is variable cost and the other is fixed cost. Variable cost deals with the cost, additional cost that will be incurred for structural hardening. That is to make that is to impart adequate strength and stiffness to the structure for a terrorist attack, right? So it depends on the type of terrorist attack. It depends on the standoff distance. It depends on the anti-terrorism strategies that you will be using. It depends on the threat level, right? So therefore, because it depends on so many different things, the cost of structural hardening will vary depending on the decision or the level of threat that you choose, right? So therefore, it is called a variable cost. Likewise, the cost of land incurred for a project is also a variable cost, because it depends on the standoff distance, which is minimum 50 meters, right? So if you choose to construct a building with ATD, then the cost of land will vary depending on the standoff distance also, right? Therefore, it is a variable cost, which is not the case in case of other ordinary designs, right? While the fixed cost could be the cost for the building envelope, that is for architectural, non-structural elements that you provide a facade for the building, and the cost for other operational measures, maintenance measures, which incorporates the intelligence measures also, which incorporates the CCTV surveillance, security barricades, and other things. These are the fixed costs, right? So different types of costs which are involved is highlighted here. For example, if you see the black line in this, the chart is prepared based on the standoff distance varying from 0 to say 100, 150 feet, and the incremental cost of protection in terms of dollars, right? So if you see the black line, it is a fixed cost related to the building envelope kind of thing and other operational things. The orange line which you see is also a fixed cost, which is involved for the premium that we have to pay for progressive collapse design. I mean, we will be designing this building to prevent progressive collapse, right? So other than ordinary structural cost or architectural cost that we incur, we have to pay certain amount of premium, say 15 to 20% higher cost, right? So that is also a fixed cost which is considered here. And the cost for windows and walls and other non-structural or architectural elements have been shown also as a straight line, which is a fixed cost, right? So irrespective of the standard distance that you have, this cost will remain fixed. Okay. Now the cost of frame, okay, that is a cost for structural system, is also shown by a blue line. Up to 50 meter of standard distance, the cost for lesser standard distance is very high and then becomes a constant, right? So after 50 meter of standard distance, the cost remains fixed. Before that, it is variable depending on the standard distance. Likewise, cost of structural hardening, that is also variable up to 50 meter, and after that it becomes fixed. Now, if you see the red curve here, it is the total cost of protection that is involved for ATD, depending on all various parameters, considering all anti-terrorism strategies, considering different types of threat levels, right? So it is a kind of a concave curve, and it is a combination of the fixed cost as well as variable cost, and you can arrive at an optimum kind of solution for a particular standard distance. For example, here in this specific case that is highlighted, all this is qualitative. This is not with reference to a particular project, but if you see here, say for a standard distance of around 40 feet or so or 35 feet or so, the total cost remains minimum here, depending on the red curve that we have for the total cost of protection, right? So this is how you can do jugglery depending on the different types of cost involved for a project, and try to find out the best standard distance which is available to you to minimize the cost for the project, right? I think I have explained to you largely about what variable cost is. It is cost attributed to implementation of anti-terrorism strategy that is affected by standard distance, type of terrorist attack, that is armed or explosion or arson, and intensity of terrorist attack, that is amount of charge used. And fixed cost is not affected by the threat level, that is cost attributed to security, surveillance, intelligence, deception, structural hardening, etc., right? Okay, let us look at the next issue. So first issue is cost. In ATD, we must realize that when we try to do ATD, the cost will be exceptionally higher than the design that we do for normal gravity loads or earthquake loads or wind loads or any other accidental load, right? Because here we are dealing with terrorist attack, indirectly we are dealing with blast, and therefore the cost incurred will be very high. Second issue is regarding building bylaws. Okay, as on the date, any country of the world has not come out with standardization or standard building bylaws giving prescription for anti-terrorism design, right? It is available for hazards like earthquake, wind, fire, and so on. For example, for fire, we have minimum, fire rating for 2 hours of fire resistance to 4 hours, 6 hours, 8 hours of fire resistance. Different prescription is given for concrete cover and for design. Likewise, for earthquake also, different prescriptions are available in building bylaws that you have to follow NBC. You have to do a particular type of analysis, particular type of design for earthquake and wind forces. So there are building bylaws available for earthquake, wind, and fire, but they are not available for anti-terrorism design. Reason may be due to shortage of information available. Though now, when we started working on this in 2005, very limited information was available, but now a lot of information is available. But they have not been standardized. Okay, maybe due to limited understanding of damages due to such attacks, maybe due to lack of data on attacks and consequences of such damages, no cost benefit studies, and not much academic and technical experimentation has been done on this, right? So we actually need building bylaws that may contain zoning of neighborhoods. For example, building bylaws of Gujarat, if I talk about, then we should have a provision in building bylaws that those cities or villages or areas which are abutting the border of the nation, okay, between India and Pakistan or India and Afghanistan or whatever it is, right? Uh, those respective states should identify such areas because they are more susceptible to terrorist attacks, okay, or military attacks also. So we should have zoning in the whole of country, that wherever it is abutting the borders or it is abutting the areas of terrorist activities, those zones, particular buildings on those zones should be designed for anti-terrorism design, should considering anti-terrorism design by specific threat level, by specific type of terrorist attacks, right? So that zoning of neighborhood should be available. Second is site planning. This is what I discussed earlier, that if we are considering ATD, the site planning should consider buffer zone also. Site planning should consider serpentine access also, which should be mentioned in building bylaws. Architectural aspects, there are several architectural aspects we need to keep in mind even for earthquake and wind zone, like re-entrant corners. The building should have simple shapes. The building should not have arbitrary changes in stiffness with reference to its height and width and so on, right? So architectural planning is also an important thing, and we should have we need to have a prescription in building bylaws if we are targeting ATD for a specific facility. There should be steps given for calculation of design loads. There should be a specific instructions or information available for type of structural analysis that we need to carry out and the type of structural design that we need to carry out. There should be specific aspects given for construction of such facilities, which for considering ATD. Quality assurance supervision and maintenance guidelines should be provided by building bylaws, okay, which is not available nowadays. Okay, we just have one information available, which is IS 4991. I think it has been revised lately, which is criteria for design of structures to resist blast above ground, right? But this is more dealing with the kind of blast in the due to in chemical factories, or blast taking place due to failure of mechanical vessels and other things, not with specific reference to terrorist attack. Okay, so this simple structural guideline is available for design of structures to resist blast. Okay, fine. So that is the second issue. First is cost, exorbitantly high. Second is building bylaws. No benchmark is available. No parameters are available. No guidance is available regarding minimum standards that we need to observe for ATD in building bylaws, right? Third is terrorist tactics. Okay, a lot of research is going on these terrorist tactics, about what type of terrorist tactic is to be considered for ATD, right? But I think the field is wide open because academics and research oriented to earthquake, wind, or ATD moves slower than the terrorism activities, because they the development in negative side takes place very fast. It is highly accelerated. The pace of development in those fields is very high. If you remember, in World Trade Center, no one has thought that one can demolish a building by the impact of an aircraft also. Till that point of time, we were thinking that there could be an attack because of missile. There could be an attack, armed attack, like people carrying weapons will go to the building, and or sometimes people may feel that the attack could be in terms of a vehicle filled with charges and causing a collision with at the ground floor of the building and so on. No one thought that that you can demolish an iconic building by crashing an aircraft into a building. So the terrorist tactics and the terrorist activities are oriented in such a way that the development has taken place very fast in those things, rather than preventing them or designing them, right? So different types of terrorist tactics which I have mentioned here is: first is explosion, second is arson, armed attacks, biological, chemical, radiological attacks, and others. Let us see them quickly. First is explosion. The explosion could be airborne, or it could be grounded detonation of explosive devices on or near the targets. Okay, the explosives can be carried by hand. Okay, in terms of hand grenade also it can be done. It can be delivered by vehicles. It can be hurled as projectile, or it can be placed through usual supplies in the buildings. You we have suicide bombers also. Certain attacks are carried out by suicide bombers. Like the death of our ex Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi was due to suicide bomber. Okay, certain terrorist attacks that has taken place are armed attacks, but certain terrorist attacks are because of the charges delivered by vehicles, two-wheeler or a four-wheeler, right? So they fall under the category of explosion. Simultaneous use of more than one of the above devices enhances the intensity of threat, and using chain of detonators enhances the duration of threat and extent of damage. Like for example, in Mumbai also there were several attacks. They were chain of attacks in the public places by explosions. Like one explosion took place and then another explosion took place 5 minutes after that. Another explosion took place at other area, nearby area 10 minutes after that. So chain of detonators, right? So it enhances the duration of threat, and it uh, intensifies the extent of damages. Uh, it causes instantaneous damage to the building. Explosion we are talking about. The extent of damage is determined by the type, quality, and quantity of the detonators used and the standard distance from the building. It covers the loss of non-structural elements, damage to structural elements, loss of structural elements, and progressive collapse of part of the building or a whole building. Right? World Trade Center is a great example of collapse of the building because of the explosion, right? Second terrorist tactic is arson, which is initiation of fire at or near the target, right? It can be initiated by direct contact or by a projectile carrying an accelerant. Duration could last from minutes to hours or days. Again, extent of damage is determined by the type and quantity of devices used, materials used, and it covers damage to structural, non-structural elements, loss of structural, non-structural elements, and progressive collapse of the part or whole building. Now, the question arises that World Trade Center, it could be because of this explosion. The initiation of collapse was because of the explosion, but because of arson also, that is the initiation of fire. Because of that particular explosion, the steel structural members of the building, main load bearing members of the buildings, which are made up of steel floors using joists, steel columns, they melted because of the high temperature they experienced because of the fire and gave up, right? So the collapse of World Trade Center in this case was attributed to not only explosion but also to arson, right? Understanding terrorist tactics, the third point is armed attacks. So it could be a direct assault or sniper attacks from remote location, like Pulwama attack. If we talk about, there was a vehicle carrying armed people was attacked by snipers from all around, midway on the road. They were approaching the destination, right? And that attack was an armed attack. It could be by small arms or rocket propelled grenades or mortars. Duration could last from minutes to hours, days. Extent of damage depends on capabilities of the attacker, and damage spectrum covers loss of non-structural elements, damage to structural elements, right? uh, we I think we need to move little quicker to end up this at least 15 minutes before the scheduled time of 3:30. The next terrorist tactic is biological, chemical, radiological attack. This is very innovative terrorism techniques. Contamination or dispersion of built environment leading to harmful effects on humans and biological life. For example, this coronavirus. People in earlier stage of this appearance of coronavirus, people thought that it is a kind of strategy which China has devised by releasing this virus all across the globe. so that they have benefits of economy. Other countries will go down in economy and they will have better upper hand in economy, right? So this is also a kind of biological attack that we can think about. Contamination could be biological, chemical, radiological. Like sometimes people also used to say that in a particular reservoir, certain type of chemicals can be released, and if that water goes to the cities and people drink that water, then there may be a lot of loss of human life due to that also. Even in agricultural also you can have kind of certain kind of pesticides which is given to those agricultural farms, and the produce which we get from there will have a mild effect on the people, and on longer duration it will affect and causes many fatal disease to people. So this is related to biological, chemical, and radiological attacks. Others is cyber terrorism, agri-terrorism, that is contamination of food supplies or introducing pests and or disease agents in crops and livestock. The damage spectrum would cover loss of life, impairment of life, and other normal activities, and long-term effect on the economy and ecology of the surrounding. Right. So this is regarding terrorist tactics that we have seen, different types of terrorist tactics that could be there. Threat assessment. As a building designer, we are mainly concerned with explosion threat. As an engineer, we are mainly concerned with threats related to explosion. Now, this could be either vehicle bombs or hand carried bombs. From building design standpoint, vehicle bomb is most important consideration, or suicide bomber. These are important considerations. They carry sufficiently large quantity of explosive to cause great structural damage. Now, these are the recommendations available in literature. I will mention to you the literature also at later part of the presentation, that for a low threat level, what kind of construction or design is required is, for low threat level, we need a minimum 50 meter of standard distance, no special treatment of structure. Security provisions could include intruder detection, CCTV, man guard provision, access control, personal and baggage screening, right? This is the type of operation, maintenance, and construction is required. Okay. Risk is assessed to be negligible, then the low level is adopted. No impact on current costs for design or construction apart from the imposition of a security culture and appropriate provisions. So no additional cost for structural hardening is required here for low threat level. This would depend on the risk assessment for the facility, the level of secure information stored on the site, and the level of protection deemed necessary for the person. Okay, for moderate threat level, here also 50 meter standoff distance is required. Structural design for robustness to prevent disproportionate collapse. That is, we are talking about robust structural design. Indirectly, we are talking about design for progressive collapse, which we will see in a short while. Okay, glazing to include laminated glasses, right? So that the during collapse, the debris of the glasses do not affect the individuals. The security provisions, as earlier, should be provided with barriers, man guard provisions, and other things. Moderate threat level means full specification for robot provisions to be used. This includes for partial blast withstand and limited personal injury, but no fatalities for truck bomb at 50 meters. So, a moderate threat level means you have to design your building for a truck bomb exploding at a distance of 50 meter from the face of the asset or the property, right? So, this will result in minor disruption to usage facilities while reparation are undertaken. The cost is 20% high on design and 10% high on construction, right? So here we incur 20% more cost on design and 10% more cost on the construction if the threat level is moderate. What if the threat level is high? Again, the 50 meter standoff is mandatory. Structural design to withstand blast from truck bomb at 50 meter with no damage and no personal injury. Okay. Right, in moderate threat level, we had to prevent the progressive collapse. That was the aim. Here, the aim is no damage and no personal injury. Okay, even the glazing, doors, windows should be blast proof, which was not so in moderate threat level, where we wanted to have a glazing with laminated glasses. Okay, and other security provisions as it is for low and moderate level. Here we require dynamic design and analysis. This would be blast proof against threat and provide partial withstand for explosion larger than defined threat. Results would be minor disruption, while the cost implications are very high. It is 150% on the design cost and 100% on construction cost. It means that ordinarily, if construction cost is rupees X for earthquake, wind, and other things, then for high threat level, the construction cost would be 2x. If the cost of design for an ordinary earthquake resistant or wind resistant building would be Y, then for this ATD, the design cost would be 1.5 times Y, right? So it is a costly affair depending on the level of threats that we are using. So this was related to identifying various issues in ATD, which includes the cost, which includes the assessment of threat, which includes various types of terrorist tactics, and so on. Right now, let us quickly overview the anti-terrorism design in 3 steps. First is predicting external loads. Second is understanding damage, and third is structural analysis and design that we need to incorporate. I'm slightly moving quickly. So predicting external loads. Okay, intensity of external loads will depend on various aspects like estimated likelihood of terrorist attack. What is the probability of having a terrorist attack here? Terrorist tactics used. What kind of terrorist tactics is used? For example, a missile, hand thrown grenade, or a suicide bomber, or a vehicle bomb, and so on. Type and amount of explosive used. What is the maximum weight of explosive that can be used? Distance between the target and the origin of explosion, that is standoff distance, and angle of incidence of shock wave. Right now, I would like to show you this particular table, which gives certain values of the parameters here, which can be useful for our design. Okay, so first let us talk about vehicle bomb. Okay, vehicle size for estimated likelihood of terrorist attack. There are 4 types of probability of terrorist attack, which is low, medium, high, and very high. If we are dealing with low threat level, then the vehicle size that we have to consider is 4,000 pounds. That is gross vehicle weight. Okay, and the charge size which can be carried into that particular vehicle would be 50 pounds of TNT, right? So if we are considering a vehicle bomb tactic for design for ATD of a particular facility, and we are considering a low likelihood of terrorist attack, then we must consider a 4,000 pounds of gross vehicle carrying a TNT of 50 pounds, right? And this explosion will take place at a measurement of standoff distance, which is minimum specified as 50 meters, right? If we have a very high threat level, then for vehicle bomb, we need to consider a gross vehicle weight of 12,000 pounds, which is a trailer truck kind of thing, a multi-axle, and the charge weight could be 2,000 pounds of TNT, which can be carried into that particular vehicle, and the blast takes place at a standoff distance, which is R, minimum is 50 meters away from the facade of the facility or the asset that we are designing. Okay, so that is related to vehicle bomb. We also need to find out for a placed bomb, right? So for low threat level, no TNT is to be considered. For a very high threat level, 100 pounds of TNT can be placed. Like if someone can come and place a bag inside the building or at the standoff distance, right, or any unobstructed space where access is easily available, and he can leave that particular bag over there carrying 100 pounds of TNT, and then explosion takes place, right? So that is a tactic that we are dealing with, is placed bomb. And standoff weapon, that is from a nearing structure, near neighborhood. In the neighborhood, if you have a high-rise building, so and the building and the distance between the building and the high-rise building could be, say, for example, a kilometer, but a person can go on top of that high-rise building and then throw a projectile or a missile from that, and then damage the properties that you are designing, right? So that is called a standoff weapon. So for high threat level, it is a TNT weight of 50 pounds is to be considered when the projectile is hurled to the building that you are designing, right? So these are a general guideline available regarding the TNT weight that you need to consider, charge weight that you need to consider in order to evaluate the load coming onto the structure. Fine. Uh, uh, it also, this is a simple figure which is shown where you have a center of blast here which is at a standoff distance from the building. The shock as soon as the blast takes place, the shock waves are generated and the pressure is created, right? The pressure is called overpressure because it is in addition to the atmospheric pressure. Fine, we will see what could be the magnitude of that. uh, when the shock wave are transmitted, it meets the obstruction surface, that is the facade of the building, right? And there reflected pressure is generated. So whenever there is an obstruction, the reflected pressure is generated, which is much higher than the overpressure. So a blast takes place, unobstructed is overpressure, and whenever an obstruction takes place to the shock wave, the reflector pressure takes place, which is much higher than the overpressure. Overpressure itself is much higher than the atmospheric pressure that we are dealing with. It could be 100 times more than the atmospheric pressure. And the reflected pressure could be at least 10 to 15 times more than the overpressure or incident pressure that we are talking about. And the drag is also generated. It is not only on the buildings, on the face of the building which is directly facing the explosion, the drag is also generated onto the sides of the building. So this is how completely the blast load is acting on the building, to understand the mechanism of blast load. To get an idea about what could be the intensity of or the complications involved in design for a terrorist attack or a blast, this figure I am showing here. For example, for wind, this is figure of frequency versus amplitude. So for wind, generally we are dealing with very low frequencies and the amplitude ranges from low to high. For seismic, we are dealing with frequencies which could be low to medium, and the amplitudes could also be low to medium. For machine vibrations, we are dealing with frequencies which is low to high and the amplitudes are quite low. But for blast, the frequency scale could be from low to very high and the amplitude scale is generally very high, right? And therefore, this design is more costlier than the cost that we incur for other designs. For example, high threat level, as we had seen earlier, the cost of construction is at least doubles and the cost of design is 1.5 times the design cost that we incur for seismic. Okay, now from earlier table we have obtained the explosion weight depending on the type of tactics, that is vehicle bomb, that we have used. Once we get the explosive weight and we know about the standoff distance, we can use this particular chart to find out the overpressure that can act upon the building, right? So the overpressure is from 0.5 psi, that is pounds per square inches, to 10 psi. Graphs are given. Okay, so for example, if you consider a net explosive weight of 100 pounds of TNT here, and if you consider a standoff distance, say for example 50 meters, that is 150 feet, so it is somewhere over here, right? So in that case, the overpressure is of the order of 1. Overpressure is of the order of 1 psi. Now, don't treat this as a small overpressure for which we have to design the building. The actual reflected pressure, as I told you earlier, is at least 10 to 15 times higher than the overpressure, right? So we should be able to calculate design pressure for given type of threat in center of distance, considering that these are the important things. Although the pressure on three sides of the building facing away from blast are smaller than those on front, they are significant. As I told you earlier, that there is a drag which is also causing, which is also acting on other sides of the building, right? Since the location of explosion cannot be predicted, each building face must be designed for worst case, that is explosion normal to that case. So the building should be designed for reflected pressure acting on each and every face of the building. That is, the analysis and design of the building should be carried out for several directions, not only for the one direction. As we do in earthquake, we consider X and Y only, right? Here, all principal directions of the buildings are subjected to maximum pressure. Okay, the different pressure values on the exposed surfaces, as I told you earlier, reflected pressure is to be considered acting perpendicular to the face of the building. The overpressure values may be considered for normal design on the whole exposed surfaces, and tributary areas are to be used to transfer this pressure onto the joint or the frames, as we do for wind load design. Now, this is the mechanism of damage I'm trying to highlight here. The blast wave breaks windows, exterior walls, blown in columns, and could be damaged, right? So this is related to external blast. Blast wave will force the floors upwards. If the blast is taking place at the ground floor, the slabs are thrown upwards, for which we don't design them, right? Therefore the damage could be higher. It will surround the structure. Downward pressure exert downward pressure on the roofs and inward pressure on all the walls. So the mechanism of action of this explosion is quite different when it is external explosion, and this is internal explosion, right? This figure shows the internal explosion, the local damage to the floors due to internal explosion, uplift of the floors above, downward movement of the floors below, and the failure of walls and windows, and venting of pressure through the various levels of the buildings. So explosion may cause local damage, it may cause global damage, and this is the idea that I gave you, that for different types of overpressure, what could be extent of damage. The one which we obtained earlier was a pressure in the range of 1, so the panels of sheet metals could buckle, right? A higher pressure could result in failure of concrete blocks, could result in complete collapse of the building if the pressure is in the range of 10 to 12 psi. This is also damage approximation for different types of weapon yield and the minimum standout distance. Okay, just a note to highlight that high pressure air can puncture eardrums and blast the open lungs of the individuals. High pressure air can shatter glasses, set them airborne, which in turn penetrates the human body. So it is not the direct collapse of the building, but it is collapse or airborne nature of the non-structural things also, which is very dangerous and may result in fatalities of life. Adjoining buildings may sustain significant damage. High pressure blast can throw persons in all directions. It can throw the individuals, persons. The shock waves are so strong, right, onto interiors of buildings or out of the buildings. It may throw the individuals out of the building. The maximum pressure evaluated is dynamic in nature and acts only for milliseconds. Now, this is very important. What I have highlighted with pink color is, by the time the inertial forces are mobilized, the loading diminishes and enhances the response. See, usually in static design or even in dynamic design of earthquake or wind forces, what happens is, when the action takes place, the reaction takes place immediately, right? So according to Newton's law, the action and reaction are same and opposite in nature at a given point of time. But in this particular case, what is happening is that the action takes place for a fraction of a second only, and it immediately diminishes. Sometimes it causes the negative pressure also, right? And before the reaction takes place, right, the action has diminished. So the it is very tricky and very catastrophic, because when action is there, reaction is not there, and when the reaction is there, only part of the action is there, or action is not there at all, right? So both the cases are exerting forces on the building, and the mobilization of reaction is not during the time the action takes place. So that this causes this particular phenomena, blast or a terrorist attack or explosion, a very catastrophic event, right? Blast load may not be combined with seismic and other forces, and usually with a factor of 1 only, it is to be considered the dead and lead load. Moderate damage is very much expected. Currently, there are no formal anti-terrorism performance criteria available for buildings. We need to keep this in mind. And structural hardening is the final solution, right? So main attributes for structural hardening or for structural analysis and design is that we need large mass, large stiffness. This is contrary to the fact that for earthquake and wind, we are looking forward to a flexible buildings having lesser mass and very flexible buildings. That is, stiffness should be accommodative, right? While for anti-terrorism design, we need large mass, large stiffness. We need highly redundant buildings so that several level of defense is available. We need capacity design to prevent return shear failure. We need resistance to load reversal, and we need strong connections. Okay, now ASCE 7 proposes three types of design methods for anti-terrorism design or for blast loading, right? One is indirect method, second is alternate path method, and third is specific load resistance method. Indirect method is simple prescription, right? For example, the figure which we saw earlier for low level table that we saw earlier, low level, medium level, and high level of threat, simple prescriptions are given that we can follow, right? So that can be used for normal buildings. For important buildings, we need to adopt alternate path method. Now, what is alternate path method? Here, we also call it a robust design, where one critical element of the building, structural element of the building, for example, a beam or column, is removed and analysis is carried out and still assure that the building remains stable. Okay, and specific load resistance method here, it includes the non-linear dynamic analysis for predicted blast load. Let us slightly focus on to the alternate path method, which is robust design as identified by BS codes, right? The basic aim of this method is to prevent progressive collapse. What is progressive collapse? I mean, this is a simple flow chart, but I hope that most of you would be familiar with that. And World Trade Center is the best example of a progressive collapse, that a local collapse takes place, which initiates the sequential collapse of various members of the building, resulting into complete collapse of the building, right? Due to time limitations, I am curtailing on this. So the main concern for ensuring anti-terrorism design is to prevent progressive collapse. Therefore, we are preventing the collapse of the building, and we need to have an alternate load path into the building with large redundancy so that the collapse of the building is prevented. Now, to have how to analyze for a progressive collapse, we are talking about alternate path method. So what we have to do is we have to perform a structural analysis by removing one critical element, that is a vertical or a horizontal element, that is a column or a beam in the load path, to stimulate local damage due to a terrorist attack, right? Now, for example, if the building is very secured that no public access is available to the interiors, we can forget about the interior columns and beams. In that case, we only deal about the external columns and beams because they are targeted by the terrorist. Okay, so external column, we can remove one column at a time and perform the analysis. The building should sustain. We can remove another column and do the analysis. So first we have to identify critical elements of the buildings in terms of columns and beams and remove them one at a time and perform the analysis and ensure that the building can sustain the predicted load, right? So by doing so, we have to ensure that load paths are available in remaining structure. That is, after removing one element, one critical element at a time, still the building should be able to resist the external loads, right? So this exercise is to be performed by removing more than one critical elements, one at a time, right? In all possible cases of removing one critical element at a time in the load path, the structure should be able to resist external loads, right? So therefore, this method is known as alternate load path method because it ensures that even one critical element is sacrificed, then also alternate load path is available to sustain the building, right? This is a simple example for non-public interiors. The figure on the left, you can remove the critical elements. For example, these columns have been identified as critical elements to start with, and you can remove these three critical elements one at a time and still ensure that the building remains stable. Okay, where interior access of public is also available, they are also susceptible. So then you have to identify critical internal elements also that can be removed, and still the load path is available for building to sustain the predicted equivalent load. This is only for columns that I have identified, but you can also identify beams along with columns and remove them one by one and still ensure that load paths are available to make the building stable under the action of predicted lateral loads, right? So this is what basically we mean by alternate path method to prevent a collapse of a building, right? For specific load resistance method, the considerations are for static design methods, equivalent static pressure can be used, like what we do for earthquake, right? And we rely more upon the overstrength of the structural elements, redundancy, plastic deformations, and ductility characteristics of buildings, like what we do in seismic design. For regular type of structures, the static design method with conservative load estimate works fine. Okay, but for high threat level and irregular type of structure, dynamic analysis is recommended. And most important is we should ensure alternate load path, right? Okay. At the end of this presentation, I would once again say that we have only dealt with conceptual, structural aspects, architectural aspects, and aspects related to engineering for anti-terrorism design. No mathematics involved in the presentation, no burden of those hi-fi equations, but just the concepts through which we can evaluate the load. We can identify what type of analysis is required for a particular type of building. Okay, interested persons or one intending to perform anti-terrorism design of buildings will do so only after in-depth study. The presentation did not include architectural considerations, utility considerations, that is MEP design, building envelopes, and building layout, security measures, perimeter protection, etc., which I feel are outside the domain of civil and structural engineering. And these are the references that I have used for this. These are wonderful references. You can download them from internet. They are easily available. Measures to mitigate effects of terrorist attack on buildings. This is published in 2007 by IITK GSDMA guidelines. FEMA 426 dating 2003 and FEMA 427 dating December 2003. Both are dealing with mitigating potential terrorist attacks against buildings and for commercial, right? So I'm very thankful to all of you for having this wonderful session with me. If there are any questions available, I am always there for you to interact. Darshan bhai, over to you.
Thank you, Nilesh sir, for wonderful and informative session. Now we have questions in the chat box. First question is, if the standoff distance available is short or it has green cover, what one can do for design?
What is the question? Can you please repeat that again?
If the standoff distance available is short or it has green cover, what one can do for design?
Yeah, see, basic thing. This is an issue in anti-terrorism design that we need a minimum standoff distance of 50 meter. Whenever you talk about ATD, irrespective of low threat level or high threat level, minimum standoff distance is required is 50 meter. So we must ensure that a 50-meter standoff distance is available. That is the first and basic principle of anti-terrorism design. It means that the explosion should take place at least minimum at a distance of 50 meter, because then we evaluate the lateral loads acting on the building and we can design the buildings accordingly. If that distance is not available, then that particular facility we cannot identify as ATD, right? Because the load involved, if you have an explosion of 100 kg of TNT just in the basement of the building, you know, the whole building is bound to collapse, right? So we cannot call that as an ATD. So along with structural hardening, it is very important that we also get other anti-terrorism strategies in place.
Another question is, what's your opinion if the hollow RC or hollow composite sections are taken as a design element like a beam or a column, how it will perform under blast around the face of the building?
Okay, usually whenever we are looking forward to a blast resistant design or anti-terrorism design with high level of threat, usually the major structural members could be walls, columns, beams. These are the important members. So you can have structural frames along with structural walls also. And the project that we had carried out, it was very much evident that all the walls should be made of reinforced concrete to resist the expected lateral load. Even sometimes the question arises that, for example, what about windows or doors? We cannot have doors and windows connecting or the material of the doors and windows such that we can resist the lateral load expected at a standoff distance of 50 meter. So the most potential wall which is expected to receive a terrorist attack or a blast load should not have any windows or should not have any doors over there, right? So that is very important, because hollow RC or hollow composite sections are not desirable for anti-terrorism design. You must have a solid sections to resist the loads available.
Okay, sir. So we have one more question, that is, in design aspect, all information like security strategy and code provisions share with all engineers, or there were secrecy maintained in such type of ATP, because first strategy in this type of building is hide information and security strategy from terrorists. Please give some information about building information sharing strategy of ATD.
Yeah, correct. This is very true, and that is why we had first strategy of deception, right? So, for example, you have a very critical activity going on in a particular building, and you want to hide that particular activity from the public or from the terrorists. So you make it appear like a hospital, right? So that is the first important thing of deception that we need to take care of. And people have been using this widely. So for example, though I mentioned to you that some of the buildings have been designed for ATD, sometimes it may not be conveyed to the public that the building has been designed for ATD, right? So deception is the first strategy, but we focus it just a common sense that we talk about, but we did not focus on that. We focus much onto the structural aspects and architectural and civil engineering aspects. We focus more onto the structural hardening and how to evaluate the lateral load for the blast and other things. But otherwise, it is very important that we must follow all other strategies also, and in sequence also, right? So it is very important that we must hide those information from the terrorist.
Sir, another is that if at all that new age materials which are developing rapidly, like concrete strengths are getting higher and higher, so will it be going to helpful in designing the ATD structures, as the new age material has potential in both the strength and the stiffnesses?
Yeah, of course. Anything, any new development which is taking place, high strength concrete and other things, whatever is available, that is going to be helpful. There is no doubt about that.
Okay, any
Any
other
other
questions from
question?
the any other question from the participants? If no question, then we can conclude the session. So I request Professor Urvesh Barot to conclude the session.
So I just want to share that with the beginning, the idea of the anti-terrorism design, and in that also Sir has taken from the first step that the deceptive is also one of the way to idealize the design of the anti-terrorism design concepts, right? And also that the uh, issues which we need to taking care while we are going to for or uh, the designing of these anti-terrorism resistant structures. So in that, I think all the participants has found it very suitable, very lucrative language sir has used to getting pass it upon. So hope that everyone got advantage and they pierce this information into the student perform also. With this, thank you so much, sir, for being present. We will uh, be very much enlightened by you. So with this, thank you from one and all.
So thank you very much to all of you for inviting me, and thank you to participants also for such a nice hearing. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you.
Thank you.
Okay.
So our next speaker has also joined, Mr. Dhruvesh Shah, sir. So soon we will start the next session within 5 to 7 minutes.
દર્શન ભાઈ, હેલો.
Yes, sir. Urvesh here.
એકવાર કરીને જોઈ લઉં.
Yeah, sir. Check कर ली.
દેખાય છે મારી સ્ક્રીન?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It is visible.
ઓકે, ચલો વાંધો નહીં. તો પાછો ફરી હું એ કરી દઉં છું, શું કહેવાય,
Yeah.
સ્ટોપ કરું છું.
Stop sharing कर दो. हाँ.
હા, ઓકે.
Sir, as the session is just completed, we'll give 5 minutes to participants to get ready.
નો પ્રોબ્લેમ, નો પ્રોબ્લેમ, નો પ્રોબ્લેમ.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.